Hi guys, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be giving you guys the 15 books that made my 2022. So this was very hard to pick just 15. I feel like I've expanded my reading taste this year and I've just had a lot of good books that I've read, and I've had a lot of 4 and 5 star reads. I think all of the ones that I picked out have been 5-star reads. I'm pretty almost 100% sure, and these are just books that I don't think I could live without now, and that I'm so happy that I read and just have enjoyed thoroughly this year. I don't really have them in a very particular order. I tried to get them in an order, but again, this is very hard for me to sort them out as my top books, and I just want to put them all in the top spot. But I do have a top 3 that I have enjoyed as much, so I'm gonna go through these. I have 15 of them, and when I get to my top 3 I'll let you guys know and just tell you why they made it into the top 3 spot. And I have shockingly picked my favorite book of the year, so let's get into what are my favorite books of the year. So it only felt right that I put this book in my favorites of the year because this was the first in a genre that I had read before. I had never tried out this genre, and then I did, thanks to a book club that I adore so much, and I adore the creators of the book club as well, and that is In the Company of Witches by Auralee Wallace. This book had so many good things about it. Again, this was my first ever cozy mystery read, and I gave it a 5-star. So I just knew that it was going to be in my top favorite books of this year. This one filled so many things that I was needing when I read it. I read this in October, and it gives you that cozy, town vibe that you want, and it gives you the spookiness of there's a murder that has happened and you don't know who's committed it, which is where, of course, the mystery comes in. And you're following these witches, and one of them has been accused of the murder, and they're trying to keep their anonymity of being witches from this town, and the town has no idea how much they actually do for them. And it was just a very neat, very cool vibe. I didn't know that you could have a fantasy cozy mystery novel, and that's exactly what I got in this book. We get to see these familiars, if you will, with the cat and the crow, and they have their own little communication link between them. And then you have these 3 sisters who are witches, and they're all so very different in their own ways. And you have their uncle, who is a very recluse homebody, and he just stays at home and does nothing, but he does come out of his shell, and he's just the funniest character ever. So I really like the aspect of having characters that I absolutely adored, and also having characters that I was very suspicious of. And this was a cozy mystery to the point where I couldn't find out who did it because I was suspicious of many people at once, which I think is done so well in this genre. I honestly was shocked that I liked this book as much as I did, but I'm so happy that I did, and I cannot wait to see what the cozy mystery genre brings me in 2023. This is another genre that I, again, had no idea existed, but when I found out that it did, I immediately jumped into it, and I don't regret it at all. I cannot wait to keep diving into it. And it is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a cozy fantasy book. Who even knew that existed? Not me. But this book is so stinking cute. If you like D&D or fantasy in general, I think that you will enjoy this read. I know it has a lot of D&D aspects in it, and I know a lot of people who have played D&D or are familiar with it really enjoyed it. So I am not familiar with D&D. I know a few things, but again, I'm no expert at it. But I really enjoyed following an orc. It was so much fun. She is this orc who has been very aggressive her entire life, and killing has been her way of life and making money. But she finds coffee, who nobody knows what coffee is but her, and she is set to make sure that the world knows what coffee is and how amazing it is. So she opens up this coffee shop, which then turns into a bakery, and it just turns into this big thing where everybody loves coffee. She hires this I don't exactly know what he is. He kind of reminds me of like a cute little mouse, but his name is Thimble, and he makes these pastries, and they're pastries that you and I have already heard of before, like croissants and things like that, but nobody in this town has heard of them. And so you see him coming up with these things, and it's just that cozy feeling of a coffee shop and, you know, baking and things that you get from the background of the story. And then you also have this succubus Tangerine, who is probably my favorite character in this book, to be honest. She comes to work with Viv at her coffee shop and just be an extra set of hands, but there is some love blossoming between the two. And I think the thing that I love about this is they built a friendship and they built something together, and they're growing together, and Viv's not alone on this journey of her coffee shop becoming a success. This book was everything that I didn't know that I needed, and I can't wait to see what else Cozy Fantasy has for me to try out. So another book that brought fiction into my life, I think mostly, is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I just have a picture up of this book because I do have a copy of this book, but I believe I have lent it out to somebody and I need to get it back. I'm not a big fiction reader, and I don't really get into that genre, you know, as much as I should probably. But this book, when I heard it was becoming a movie, I immediately set out to get it because I had heard so many things from other people tell me that it was so worth it to read the book, and the movie itself also did not disappoint in any way. I absolutely loved the setting of this book. I loved that you get the like North Carolina swamps and the kind of things I would see around where I live, which is in the country, and just, you know, figuring out things as yourself. I feel like a lot of people do that here in the South, where they may not necessarily have had opportunities to do things like go to school or do things like that, but they always had the opportunity to work and create and build what they had at home. And this book is, you know, taking place in the 60s, which is when all of that kind of thing is happening, and, you know, it's a great timepiece, I believe. And the thing that I love the most about this book is it felt like different genres were coming together. You get mystery because the book starts off with a death, and they find out that this guy has been killed, and, you know, they're trying to find out who killed him. And you get fast forwarded to where the main character Kaya gets arrested for his murder. She had been dating this guy and stuff like that, but she is genuinely convincing you that she is innocent. And you're like, why is this girl who is just an outcast being framed for something that people are putting on her because she is different than the rest of them? So you get that aspect of kind of being, like I said, an outcast and pushed away from what is normal, and they're putting all the blame on her just because she doesn't fit in with the rest of the town. You also get a romance aspect because you have kind of a love triangle, and you see Kaya grow up and you see her love change from one boy to the next, and it's just so good. I'm a big Tate fan myself, if you didn't know. So I love this book because you get mystery, romance, a coming of age story, and it's just so beautifully set and beautifully written that I'm so glad the movie did it justice when I went to see it. It is now probably one of my favorite books and favorite movies of all time. Another book that I really loved was Every Summer After by Carley Fortune. I think I got more into the romance genre this year instead of like new adult romance. I just focused on romance, and this one I think is actually just considered a fiction novel because you do kind of have a coming of age story for our main character Persephone, but they call her Percy. You do get that coming of age, and she's growing up and she's learning and figuring out who she is, but you also get her background story of her moving to this summer home, or her moving to this lake house during the summertime and meeting this family and falling in love and finding, you know, herself and who she is as a person. But you also get the romance aspect with her and Sam, who is in this book, and Sam is a dream. I find it so weird because I don't really like water that much. I don't really care to go into a lake that much. Don't care about the ocean. Don't want to go in there. I don't know what's out there, so I tend to stay away. But anytime a book happens near an ocean or a coastal place, I'm all in. I don't know why. I just am. I don't know what's wrong with me. So the fact that Percy gets to go to this lake house and kind of see what life is all about here during the summer and just have her vacation with her family is so cute to me. I love that they get to go and spend the entire summer there, and they're basically residents for like 3 months. And then you have Sam, who has a brother named Charlie, and his mom, I think his name is Sue, if I remember correctly, but I don't remember. And they live at their lake house all year round. Sue is a big she's a big aspect to the town that they live in. She owns a restaurant and she cooks. And Sam and Charlie are growing up, and you know, Charlie's that bigger older brother that likes to mess around and joke about Percy and Sam having feelings for each other, even though they're just young, you know, teenagers who say that they're best friends but secretly have feelings for each other. And then you get the aspect of like Percy and Sam actually trying something out and being in a relationship, and I think you get to encounter first heartbreaks and first breakups and how that goes and how it has affected them throughout their life. And you know, Sam gets on with his life, Percy gets on with her life, and then they're coming back together for the funeral of Sam and Charlie's mom. And you know, things are being spread open and things are being laid out, and you get to see all of these secrets that they kept from each other, but all of the love that they still have for one another. And it's just, this book was, again, it was heartbreakingly beautiful, and I cannot wait to read more from this author. Another one that I read recently and just knew I had to put it on this list because it was so good was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. This was the first Jennifer McMahon book I read. I think that I burned myself out really quickly this year with some holiday romance reads as soon as, you know, Christmas time came around, and by the time Christmas was coming to a close, I was like, I'm not feeling Christmas like romancy books at all. I just want something that happens during the winter, but I don't want a Christmassy book. So Olivia had sent this to me before at one point, and I was like, it's time for me to pick up my first Jennifer McMahon. And this book is so creepy and so good. I felt like this was one of those books that I couldn't put down. I just had to keep reading because I had to know what was contained in the next chapter. You have this secluded house. It's in a small town, but this secluded house, and I think it's happening in the 1900s, the early 1900s, that is secluded by itself, and nobody goes there. I believe they call it the Devil's something. I can't remember exactly, but they call it, it has the word devil in it. If it has the word devil in it, it's probably not good. But it starts off with this woman who is living in the 1900s. She's had a miscarriage before, she has lost a child, and she has always struggled with wanting a kid but just never being able to have one. And she finally has one, and the girl goes missing, and she is devastated as any mother would be, and they end up finding her daughter, and her daughter is dead. And I just feel for her as a person, as a woman, and I can't even imagine what she's going through. That's in the book, and I think Jennifer McMahon did a really good job of portraying that grief and showing that this mother cannot live without her daughter. And you know, there's this thing that's coming out where they have sleepers, which are people that are dead and come alive for 7 days, and you're able to communicate with them. But you kind of understand that these people that are coming back from the dead are not people that are themselves. Like, it wouldn't be me coming back from the dead. It would just be my shell of a body and something else deeper, darker inside of me. And you get to follow this family in the 1900s, and then it fast forwards to present day, and this girl named Ruthie and her sister Fawn, their mother goes missing, and it's just not like their mom to do that. So they kind of set out to find their mom, and so many secrets get spread wide open. I feel like once the ball started rolling, the secrets just kept coming out and coming out and coming out, and you had no idea what was going to happen next. So if you want a creepy, eerie read for wintertime, this one was my, literally, I couldn't have asked for a better book. The next one was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I have read Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation. I still need to read Book Lovers, but so far this is my favorite Emily Henry book. I found out that I loved friends to lovers in this book. So that is now one of my new favorite tropes, and Emily Henry helped me to find that, so all props goes to her. I love the aspect of this book that two people who are really close friends meet up every year to go on vacation together, and they never let it stop because they're trying to keep their friendship together but still live their normal lives and lives that they have kind of built without each other, but they never wanted to be without each other. And so you're following Alex and Poppy, and Poppy is like the complete opposite of Alex. Alex is like this secluded reader, and he just sticks to himself, and he's introverted, and Poppy is extroverted and out there, and she's not afraid of anything, and she's like what I dream I could be like, but I'm more like an Alex than I am a Poppy. I would say it's a slight grumpy sunshine. Alex is not always grumpy, but he tends to be grumpy a little bit, and Poppy is definitely not grumpy. But you know, things have gotten between them, and things aren't the same anymore. So Poppy suggests that they go on one last vacation together, and she hopes to kind of build up their friendship back to what it used to be. But I think they both kind of have hid feelings for each other. I don't think Poppy knew she had feelings for Alex, but I feel like Alex always knew he had feelings for Poppy. And so they go on this vacation. Things are going horribly wrong, but I still love that they make the most out of it. And it was just the cutest, sweetest read for me to read this summer, and I can't wait to get more into her books. This book is a sequel to a book that I read last year in 2021, and it is These Twisted Bonds by Lexi Ryan. This is the second book in a duology. The first one was These Hollow Vows, and this one, oh my goodness, it was just as good as the first one. I worry so much about second books in a series. They usually are dull, but when it's a duology, you're kind of hoping that the author ends the book in a way that is still going to make you happy and satisfied with the story. And I also am not a fan of love triangles at all. I actually hate them so much, but this love triangle in this series was done so well that I was pulling for one at one point, and then I start finding out things that are going on, and it kind of switches to another person, but I also still have feelings and feel for the other guy that I used to like. That never happens to me, but the fact that it happened in this book makes me love it so much. I loved the fantasy aspect, and you know, finding out that nobody is what they seem in this book. You know, Abriella has found out many different secrets in the first book. It ended on a cliffhanger, and it was wrapped up beautifully in this book. And in this one, it focuses a little bit more on Abriella's journey for herself and finding out who she is and everything that she found out in the first book, trying to cope with that and still figure out where her feelings lie. Do they lie with Sebastian, who has lied to her and, you know, betrayed her in a way, but she knows his true personality and who he truly is, and she knows that she still loves him, but she needs to let him go? Or does she, you know, move towards Finn, who also betrayed and lied to her in a way, maybe not as severe as Sebastian did, but still hurt her and cut her feelings to the point where she can't trust him anymore, but she knows that he has her best intentions in, you know, his heart. And it's just, I literally can't stop raving about this book. If you had not read it and you love YA fantasy, read it. Just read it. Trust me. I feel like I have a lot of horror books on this list, but I think this was the year I first really got into horror books, and I've just loved a lot of the ones that I picked up. And one of those was The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I feel like I've talked about this book quite a bit on here, but this book was so confusing, and I didn't know how much I liked books that were confusing until I read this. You are following a talking cat, you're following a girl, you're following this strange man, and you have no idea how these people are connected. And there's this creepy house, and this girl, I don't even know how to describe this book without spoiling it, because I really don't want to do that for anybody. But the whole time you're reading from different perspectives of the story, and I'm not even lying, this entire book confused the crap out of me. I had no idea what I was reading most of the time, but I knew there were parts that scared me. I remember one part specifically where I literally had to close the book and not read for the rest of the night because I was by myself and I was just kind of a little nervous, and books usually don't make me scared, but if this one did, that means that it did a great job. And the spin and twist on the book at the very end made this book exactly what it needed to be. It is one of those things where you're gathering information and you're taking in what you're reading and you're very confused, but at the end every single thing just kind of clicks into place and everything makes sense and you are blown away. I have never seen a twist in a horror book done like this one was, and that's why I literally had to put it in here, because I was shell-shocked for probably at least a week. Okay, shocker, here comes another horror book, and that is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This is like seriously one of my favorite things ever. This book got me out of a reading slump and I read it so quick. I just knew that it was already going to be in my favorites list as soon as I finished reading it. I love the summer feel that this book gets. You're following these teenage girls and, you know, they're being dumb and they're doing things that you're questioning, so you know they should be questioning it. And they are going in, you know, a haunted house where you're like, don't go in there. Like, that's why people die in the first place, is they explore things they shouldn't. And you are following two very close friends, and one of them has been possessed by a demon of some sort, and you get to see her change from this you know, like happy-go-lucky teenager who is so close to her friend to this girl who nobody recognizes anymore. This book is gruesome and gory, and it explains things that make you sick to your stomach sometimes, but it was so freaking funny at the same time. Like, you have this scary story going on where this girl is literally being possessed by a demon, which is very scary to think about, and this girl is scared to lose her friends. But then you get characters like Brother Lemon, who is the exorcist, who is like this big buff gym dude, and he is just so ridiculously funny that you can't even look at him. I can't even read about him without laughing, and just looking at him makes me smile because it's insanely hilarious. And I love that aspect of this book. You get that horror scariness, but also Grady Hendrix uses the humor to kind of mellow it out and still make this a very enjoyable read. This was seriously one of the best books ever, and I don't think any of his other books will live up to this for me, but it does make me excited to try out more by him. This one I knew had to go on this list because it is seriously becoming one of my favorite series of all time, and that is Finlay, Donovan Knocks Him Dead by Elle Cosimano. This is the second book in the Finlay Donovan series. The first one is Finlay, Donovan is Killing It, and the third one that's going to be coming out soon in January is Finlay, Donovan Jumps the Gun. This book I would consider a cozy mystery in a way, but I think it's just in the regular mystery section if I'm not confused. But you have this mom who was a writer, and she has these two kids who I think are under 5, and she has a babysitter who is like her best friend, but she's also got this ex-husband who kind of still has feelings for her, but he's also had an affair before, and he's had an affair on his affair. It was a lot. He's a lot. Stephen is not my favorite person ever, but in this book Finlay is kind of just juggling life after she accidentally accepted an assassination job in the first book. I don't want to get into how she accidentally did it. I don't know how you accidentally do that, but she did. And so she's kind of adjusting back to life, and she's back to her writing and having to have a book published very soon, or at least, you know, written and her manuscript sent out. But she is, you know, she's come into a lot of money from the last book, and her babysitter Vero are adjusting back to life with money and with the kids. And you know, they got a note in the last book that was very shocking, and so they are trying to get around this note and trying to figure out what they need to do next and to keep the kids safe. And you also get to see a lot of Finlay's love triangle. It's not really a triangle, but her kind of like love situation come out. Her romance, her relationships come out in this book. She is seeing a law student. I think he's a student. And his name is Julian, and he's much younger than Finley, and he kind of is just like her ball of fun. He is her way of releasing stress. But then you have this detective, Nick, who Finley knows she has to stay away from because she gets herself into trouble a lot, but she just is gravitating towards him, and he is not backing down, and he really wants to get Finley to go out with him. So I think that's why I loved this one even more than Finley Donovan, is because I'm obsessed with Nick, and I loved having that relationship vibes in this book, because you get to see Finley's relationship with her ex-husband, her kids, and her babysitter, and these men she's seeing more in this novel, and how she kind of navigates those with her writing and being a mother and being involved in the Russian mob. So there's a lot going on here for Finley. I'm also not going to read a book that's like over 800 pages and not mention it on my favorites list if I kept reading for those 800 pages. So I'm putting House of Earth and Blood, which is the first Crescent City novel from Sarah J. Maas, on this list. This book was a chunker, and I read it in a week, which I consider very successful. We all know I'm a big fan of Sarah J. Maas's series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Seriously love that book and that series so freaking much, and this one was no exception. I like that this one was slightly more adult than A Court of Thorns and Roses is. I know that it becomes like more adult in the later books, but this one just kind of starts off that way. It was also a very different kind of book because Bryce is nowhere near the same as Feyre in A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I really liked that aspect. I love that this was a city run by different beings. Like, there aren't just regular humans walking around mostly, but this one also starts off with a mystery because somebody is dead in this book, and so you have Bryce, who is trying to figure out who killed her friends, and you also have Rune, who is her stepbrother, and he is amazing, and I've heard that we get to see more of him in the second book, which I'm excited about. And we also meet Hunt, who is in charge of keeping an eye on Bryce, and he's kind of under, I mean, he is kind of under arrest. He doesn't have his freedom, and so they are basically taunting him with getting his freedom for watching Bryce. But as we know, things heat up between Bryce and Hunt, and it's just, I loved this book. I love the world building. It took me a little while to get into this book because of that, but I honestly do enjoy world building. I love the fact that we get to know all of these characters and what they do for their everyday lives and what their relationships are to one another. There was so much going on in this book that I cannot unpack it all in this, you know, shorter video, but it is just, it was awesome. It was amazing. And the characters, I loved almost everybody in here, you know, that I was supposed to love. Any of the bad guys, you know, I obviously didn't like, but I'm so ready to see more of the characters in the next book, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a third, so I'm even more excited about that. Okay, we're coming close up. This is the fourth book. This is high up there on my list, we'll just say that. The next one is Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak, I believe is how you say his name, or Rekulak, I don't really know. But this book was everything that I needed in a horror novel. I love, let me see if I can find one to show you guys, the creepy drawings. Can we just stay here for the creepy drawings? This book read so quick. I think I read it in like 2 or 3 days. It was terrifying to read as someone who watches kids or has watched kids for a long time and kind of not really nannied, but when I tell people that's what I've done for jobs and stuff, they say it's a nanny, so I just kind of go with it. But this girl is a nanny for this little kid, and he is doing some creepy stuff, and just weird things are happening, and you are kind of like, is this child possessed? What is going on? And things that cannot be explained are happening, and I hate creepy children. And Mallory is young. She's like 20. She's young. She's like 21, 22. So you feel for this girl because she's just coming out of like a really hard time in her life. She was in rehab for drug use, I believe, and so she's coming out and this family is taking her in, and she starts seeing things, or not really seeing things, but seeing the little boy Teddy do things, and he's drawing these things that are creepy, and she's bringing it to the parents' attention, and they're just like kind of pushing it under the rug, and she is very confused as to why, and so things start getting blamed on her because of her previous drug use. But this gardener that also works for the same family is trying to, you know, see if she's the kind of girl that he likes, and he's asking her on a date and just kind of having like that nice banter back and forth between each other. But she is convincing him that something is wrong with Teddy, something is wrong with this kid, and things come out, and I was shell-shocked. I swear that I stared at the wall with my mouth hung open for like 15 minutes straight. It was ridiculously brilliant. I know this book is kind of like a trigger warning and has kind of mixed reviews, but to me, I was just shell-shocked. I was so confused and so enamored. Like, I would have never thought that the book would have ended the way that it did, and that's what I look for in a book when I read it. So I definitely want to see if this author has more to read, and hopefully he comes out with something else soon that is just as brilliant as this book. Okay, now we're moving on to my top 3 books of the year. Coming in at a solid number 3 is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This was my first Riley Sager book that I've ever read, and I'm so glad I started with this one. I love following Maggie into this haunted house. You know, she has bad memories of this house that her parents moved her into. I don't even think she lived in there that long, and it was just, she saw things that were so strange, and her parents, you know, struggled with her being comfortable in this house. She couldn't even sleep in her own bed. She was very young when these things happened, so she tries to convince herself that things like this didn't really happen. It was just her imagination as a kid. So when, you know, her parents are dead, or maybe it's just her dad. I think her parents ended up getting divorced, now that I remember, and her mom is like this too good for everybody else kind of woman that lives in the city. But her dad dies, and she goes to renovate this house and sell it because that's what she does for a living. And, you know, she's staying in this house while she's renovating it, and the same kind of creepy things that happened to her as a kid are happening again. I love it. It was kind of like a Haunting of Hill House moment for me, which I think was why I liked this book so much. There are creepy things going on. It felt like while I was reading it, I was also watching a horror movie. A horror movie was playing out in my head, so that's why I was really drawn into this book as soon as I started it. I also love the fact that Maggie is... there are things that Maggie sees that remind her of different things. Her dad also wrote a book about this house, and Maggie was convinced by her mom, and I kind of think by herself, that things that happened didn't really happen in the book. Her dad just made it up and played on her fears and her nightmares to create this book. And she starts reading it, and things start happening, and things all come together and make sense, but you kind of find out what's going on, and you feel bad because I'm sure that Maggie and her mom didn't treat her dad the best with how he wrote this book, and maybe he did write it and get money for their story and kind of put their story on blast to get fame and fortune out of it, but you still feel for him in the fact of nobody can say that what he wrote was entirely false. He just did it, he went about it the wrong way. But this was so creepy and so eerie, but it's also considered a mystery thriller book, so you get that thrill feeling of finding out what's actually going on in this house and who's involved and everything like that. So I couldn't have picked a better book to start this author with. And again, I've said it many times from these other books, but I seriously cannot wait to get more into Riley Sager's novels. Okay, the second book that this is my top 3, so my second book of this year that I completely loved was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I have another picture again. I do own this book, but again, I lent it out to my grandma, and she should be done with it pretty soon, but she and I both have loved this book so freaking much. I like the fact that this is a thriller that is happening in a psychiatric hospital and nobody here can be trusted. There have been people that have been accused of murder and people that have been accused of like really bad crimes, but they have been condemned as not fit for trial or not fit to sit in jail. Their minds aren't, you know, they're not well. And you're following this therapist, Theo, who is seeing this lady, and he's taking a special interest in her case. She has killed her husband, and she doesn't speak. She draws, but she doesn't speak. She, you know, refuses. So you're following him, and she lashes out quite a bit at him. She lashes out at everybody, really, and you're trying to get into her mindset and his mindset, because you also are seeing personal things go on in his life, and you're trying to figure out why you're really getting into his personal life, like his relationship with his wife and things like that, when you think you're supposed to be focused on his patients and things like that. There were things in this book that really did entertain me and excite me, but I had no idea why it was considered a thriller book. I was like, okay, I get that this is kind of different, but the twist at the end was beautiful. This was the first, I think, actual thriller book that I've read. I know that I had read the You series, but to me that wasn't as thrilling. That was more just like a fictional read in my opinion, but that's just me. So that book will always be forever in my heart as being like a shocking thriller book that I read for the first time in my adult life. And coming in at my #1 pick, this book had to be my #1 because no book has ever made me smile and laugh and cry at the same time like this one did. I have never loved so many characters as this book, and I have never just longed to be in with these characters or in this story as I have with this one. And it's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. We absolutely love her. I think I read this book so quickly. I was enamored. This book has the magical realism aspect of a girl who can never be remembered. You can spend, I think, like a day with her, if I'm not mistaken. I forget exactly how it is, but I'm pretty sure that you will remember her for like 24 hours, or maybe if you just see her, you will know. Yes, if you see her, you'll know, like if I'm seeing, I don't even know how to explain this. So if it's a girl who, once you see her, you know, you find out who she is, what she's like. As long as you have her in your eyes, like you are around her and you know her, you'll remember her. But once she leaves and you try and come back, you won't remember her. And it's a curse because she made a bet with, or made a deal with the devil basically to continue living and not die. And so he makes her this deal. But then, you know, she's spending countless times with these people trying to find love, trying to find something that she's missing in life, and she just never can. But then she goes into this bookstore and she meets this guy named Henry, and then she goes in the next day and Henry remembers her, and this has never happened, and she's so confused. And Henry doesn't know that this is a thing. She doesn't want to tell Henry because she just wants to enjoy, you know, her time with him. But it was just the aspect of this book. I literally can't talk about it enough, especially without giving away the ending, because that's the part I want to talk about the most. But this book, this just gave me everything I needed. It made me feel so happy for Addie. It made me feel so sad for her because other people cannot remember her. And you also get like the back and forth of why she made this deal, and you get to see flashbacks of her past, and I just feel so much respect and love and empathy for her, and I love them. Addie and Henry, #1 couple goals. I love them so much, and this book completely destroyed me, and that's all I know. That's all I know, is that I love it, but I also really hurt because of it at the same time. So those are all the books that made my 2022 what it was this year. I have read so many good books this year. It was so hard to make a list because I branched out and read what I wanted to read. So I had a lot of 4- and 5-star reads this year, and I couldn't have asked for a better reading year, to be quite honest. I'm just so excited to see what 2023 is going to bring me and see what makes the list at the end of next year. But thank you guys so much for joining me today again and for watching. I appreciate you all so stinking much, and I will see you in my next video.